Philip, welcome to Realistic Happiness Podcast.
Thanks for having me.
So if I'm tuning into this episode, I ask this to all my guests. If I'm tuning in, what can I expect to learn from you today?
Today you learn how to become a master storyteller. And I want to make it very specific so that you have some actionable tools on how to tell unforgettable stories, both at work, but also outside of work. And hopefully we can cover as well some mindset hacks on how to feel much more comfortable speaking in public.
I do a lot of speaking and I feel like I need this, and I'm sure our audience also needs this as well. So I think my first question to you is, even if I have this powerful story to tell, why do I struggle to tell this story authentically? Why do I have like this blocker if my story is like really compelling or really powerful?
The biggest blocker is usually that people wait for the story to be perfect. They spend days crafting the perfect story. They think like, let me tweak this, let me do this. And at the end, even if you already share that imperfect story, it will already be good enough. And so I would say the biggest blocker that keeps people from telling stories is that they think that the story has to be perfect. And so what I like to do is I like to use much more tell micro stories. Now, what do I mean with that? Instead of thinking, hey, I have to tell now a 2-minute stories, think of how can I just share a snippet of the story? For example, let's say you go home at the end of the day, you talk to your partner, to your roommate, and you share about your day. So instead of then sharing an entire story, you can just share a snippet where you say, oh yeah, this morning I was in a meeting and this one guy says, Philipp, that was unacceptable. Like that was the worst presentation in my life. Really, that was difficult. Now that could already be the story, right? It doesn't have to be an entire story right now. But just sharing those micro moments, those tiny stories, instead of having this entire story already mapped out.
Yeah, that's the issue I have as well, that I think I need this like start to finish novel for my story, instead of like, because I was already hooked when you were talking, when you were saying just like the beginning of the story, right? And it was something mundane. It was about work. It was a presentation, but you made it sound so interesting. So if I, for example, I don't know, I want to tell a story to my colleague or my friend and I have this whole narrative, then how do you, is there a formula to like pick certain bits of the story, or do I just start from the beginning, like the start of the day? Like how does it work?
Yeah. Let me share the most important thing when it comes to storytelling. Let me share a quick analogy for that. Imagine watching this war movie. And just to be sure, I'm not into that, but imagine you're watching this war movie. And it starts with this helicopter shot all the way from the top. You see the tanks advancing, you see the soldiers from somewhere far. After a while, you're like, dude, bring me down here, right? I want to see the action. I don't want to stay in the helicopter. And then it zooms down. It goes into the trenches. Then you're part of it. You see the soldiers. You see the mud. You see the bombs exploding. Then you're part of that. Now, how does that relate to storytelling? Storytelling is oftentimes so lousy because people stay at this helicopter shot. They stay at this very high level. They say something like, well, I had this problem and then, I did a bunch of things and overcame that problem. That's helicopter view. And it's just terrible. And so the better way is to zoom into one specific moment. Take us into one specific moment. So for example, you share, hey, just 2 weeks ago, I'm in this meeting room, taking a deep breath. Just a minute ago, I received a crazy email. And so you zoom into one specific moment. Zooming into one specific moment is the single most important thing when it comes to storytelling. If you want to, I can share a few techniques how you can zoom in.
Yeah, sure. I'm noticing the words you're using as well, like crazy, like you're using certain words as well to like accentuate the story.
Yeah, true. Yeah, those ones are, I would say, anticipation hooks, right? When you said, hey, last week I had this encounter that completely changed how I think about life. And so if you just use a sentence before your story, you can hook your audience already before you even start your story. And so it's just a sentence that gets them excited. Where you say, wow, a month ago I had this meeting with a customer and it went far better than I would have ever expected. And now you're curious, like, okay, what was that meeting, right? And so you want to know. But that's a different technique. The technique that I use the most to zoom into the moments are 3 things. The first one is actions. So describe what you're doing. So instead of just talking generic, you say exactly what are the actions. Are you walking? Are you breathing? Are you drinking? Are you talking? Take us immediately into the action of the story. So you say, hey, 2 weeks ago, I'm in my apartment, closing my laptop and taking a deep breath. Then you're already into the story, right? So that's the first one, actions. The second one is inner dialogue. Now, we as humans have thousands and thousands of thoughts every single day. A lot of those thoughts are weird thoughts, anxious thoughts, hopes, dreams, plans. Now, share some of those thoughts. Those thoughts will make it much more interesting. Let me give you some examples. So instead of saying, I was very nervous, say, in this moment, I thought, that was bad, right? Everyone will think now I'm stupid after that presentation. So you share what is going on in your mind. Or if you're, instead of saying, I was very excited, say, I thought, yes, finally, right? This is the biggest opportunity of the year. So you share the thoughts, share the raw, unfiltered thoughts. So that's the second one. And the third one, and that one is the one that I use the most, and that is outer dialogue. We talked about inner dialogue, that's the thoughts that are going on in your head. And the outer dialogue is much more, what are the words that are said? And that one, anytime that your story has more than one character, share what were the exact words of that person of that person in that specific situation of the story. Mm-hmm. So what did they say? So for example, instead of saying, my manager was very disappointed, say, in that moment, my manager said, Philipp, what on earth was that? Like, you were all over the place. Or instead of saying, my customer was very happy, well, you say, my customer called me 3 weeks later and said, wow, that new tool, game changer. Like, we increased our revenue by 10. Thank you so much. Do you see the difference? It's like, it seems maybe a little bit like semantics, but it makes such a huge impact on your story. So yeah, those are the things usually, how I like to zoom into the moment. I share the actions that are unfolding. I share the inner dialogue, what is going on in my mind. And I also share the outer dialogue. What are the words that are being said?
Yeah, and I think some key things here. Thank you so much for sharing, by the way. I'm already thinking, like, how am I going to apply this in my life, but also like in content and maybe an upcoming workshop as well. I think two things pop up for me is that with the inner dialogue, do you think that people are afraid, of being vulnerable and actually like, because that's really speaking your truth, right? Thinking like, oh shit, like I thought this in the moment. And if you just say that in your story, you're exposing yourself, right? So it is easier to say, oh, I felt lazy that day, or oh, I was tired, instead of actually, I wasn't feeling like myself, I was feeling a bit depressed, I was worried about XYZ, which does, like, I was already hooked when you're telling me in the story, but maybe some people aren't ready, to share the inner dialogue. So do you think that's what the problem is?
Yeah, some people have that worry, especially in business, that they're like, I don't want to overshare. But yeah, for stories to land, there has to be this degree of vulnerability. If you don't share anything personal, well, then it's not going to be in any way an interesting story. I would say for not necessarily in business, but let's say if you want the story to be really good, it should almost be where you doubt yourself, like, can I tell this? Then okay, that is a good level of vulnerability. I wouldn't recommend that necessarily for business, but let's say if you want to do stage storytelling, if it feels a little bit like, this is a bit too emotional, this is a bit too vulnerable, then oftentimes that will be actually the best story.
Yeah, wow. Okay, so if you feel like, oh, this is too much, that's, if you're scared of it, you should go towards that story then, because it's going to be a good one. And also something I noticed as you were explaining is that you use a lot of words, like descriptive words, like you speak a lot in general as you're telling the story. And I think people rush because people think, oh, they don't have time to listen to me. Or if it is a keynote, I need to adhere to the time, or people are busy, like they don't have time to listen to me. So do you think that's also an issue, that people feel like they're rushed and they can't be descriptive as they're telling a story?
Yeah, I would say so, but I think it's a fair concern, because in business, but oftentimes also with your friends, you don't have 5 minutes, 10 minutes to tell a story. Unless you're an incredible storyteller, no one is going to be like, oh, please share 10 minutes of some boring stuff. No one is going to be like that. And so I would encourage the people to try to share their stories in a minute, maybe in 2 minutes, and that's it. And just to tell them still in an engaging way. So sure, you don't have to be super descriptive that you describe right now everything, but rather than just bring in one key point of dialogue or one key thing that was going on in your mind. So I would say try to train yourself to tell stories that are usually a minute, maybe 90 seconds, max 2 minutes.
Okay. And I also notice as you speak, we have very different tones as we speak. You're very enthusiastic. Like you really put a lot of power into almost every word and every sentence that you say. How does that, did you have to like teach yourself that? Because for example, I'm a very monotone person, I think.
You don't seem like one.
Sorry?
You don't seem like one.
Oh, really? I don't know. Not monotone. Yeah, I think I'm a bit lazy sometimes with voice notes or with storytelling. But did you have to train yourself to like add a bit of oomph, a bit of power into everything you're saying? Because that does make a difference.
On this one, I had actually an interesting moment a couple of weeks back. I was on my weekly coaching call with my coach, with my therapist. And she said, we started talking for like a minute, and she said, Philipp, I've seen your videos. Why? Like, you're charismatic there, you have high energy, and then you show up here and you're this. Like, what's going on there? And I'm like, no, I think I'm a little bit more introverted, right? I'm a little bit more grumpy by myself. And she said, hey, why not? Why? Who says this, right? At the end, your energy is a set of learned patterns of a habit that you build. And so you can change that anytime. You can choose to show up more present, more charismatic in every situation. So what she made me realize is that I have a choice. I can show up anytime that I want in a more high energy, more present way. Sure, it doesn't have to be that I now change my entire being, but I can still bring in that intention. And that was cool to see, because oftentimes I noticed that I was having maybe this stage presence, but then in my day-to-day, I was then slipping back into my, I just want to chill. But now I just realized, hey, I can bring this in any conversation as well.
Yeah. So is it important as well to embody it like in your personal time as well, just so you're constantly like high energy, and not high energy, but like you embody this all the time, so you're not like acting like a performer? Because I can imagine, I'm totally with you on that, by the way, that you can change your mindset and show up as your higher self or ideal self all the time, but other people might think like, oh, I'm putting on a performance, you know, like, because maybe they are introverted and they're like, I don't really want to do that. Yeah,
I was thinking about this as well. But what I realized, everything, how we operate today, who says that this is authentic? It is just a set of behaviors that we picked up. Let's say same with voice, right? At one point, let's say my dad speaks like this. And then I thought, oh, this is cool. I like how monotone my dad speaks. And then for the rest of my life, I speak monotone. But I wasn't born with that speech, but I recognized it at one point. And I thought, hey, this is my authentic way. But the moment that I then try something else, you can change that. So I'm always a little bit skeptical about calling things authentic, because at the end, everything is just a set of learned behaviors. And once you do that often enough, well, that's then part of you. So yeah, if I am the same person in a year from now, I would be a total failure, because hopefully I will still continue to evolve. Maybe I speak completely different next year. And that's just part of learning and growing. And so, yeah, I'm sometimes a little bit skeptical when people say, this is not authentic.
Yeah. And also if you, for example, apply this to content creation, or you start putting yourself out there at work, for example, the people who are in your circle, your friends, family, colleagues, or your followers on social media, they might think, if they see such a change, right, within a year, they might think like, because they know like a different side of you. So if you try and be more confident, outspoken, authentic, let's say, and embody this version of yourself. Yeah, I had this too, when I started like posting and especially speaking up at work and doing these workshops and stuff. Yeah, I had people like, who are you to do that, So for those that are a bit more like stepping into it and they're very early in this journey, like how can they handle this? Like, it's not really, is it imposter syndrome, I guess, if they're like doubting and like, what are my friends and family and colleagues gonna think? They might think I'm fake.
Yeah. So there, the rule is, don't practice that stuff with your family or friends first. No matter what the change is, your family will tell you, this is weird. Like, just be normal. What are you doing there? So let's say an easy one for a lot of people is, if you want to sound more confident, speak 20% or 30% in higher volume than usual. Very easy, because most people speak not loud enough. And speaking louder makes you usually seem a little bit more confident. And so if you want to practice that, well, then maybe don't practice that right now with your family, because they'll tell you it's weird. So I would say then practice with the people that don't know you that well, where you're starting off, because then it's much easier, because when they see you speaking, they're like, hey, this is completely normal. And then you start to grow more comfortable, and then you can talk to your family about that.
Yeah. And 20 to 30% louder volume. Wow. Okay. So I'm just trying to picture this in a scenario like a networking event or on a date, for example, as well. Like, I can imagine that maybe I'd feel a bit weird, you know, because it's so unnatural for me. And maybe I think I'm being like obnoxious, because, you know, like loud people have this like, stereotype that they just like blurt things out before they think, right? So again, I just want to like tackle a bit more like the mindset of like storytelling and projecting your voice as well. How was your experience with that? Did you just do it, and then with repetition and stuff you like got more comfortable with it, or how did you do it?
Yeah, when it comes to voice, I remember back in the days I felt super self-conscious about my voice. I always thought like, I want to have this masculine voice, this radio voice, because this was what the alpha men have. And I remember back in the days when I was maybe like 20, I was doing all those weird exercises at home, doing all those weird exercises.
We will not clip this, because this would be a different episode.
And I was just doing those weird exercises, and I walked into the street and was like, hey, what's up? I'm Philipp. And I tried to speak in this little voice, and obviously I just sound like a complete douchebag. It sounded terrible. Now, what I learned with voice, because I know so many people feel self-conscious about their voice. First, you are the only person that thinks your voice is weird. No one else thinks that. Because when we hear ourselves, we're like, this is cringy, I don't like that. But no one else, everyone else is like, hey, cool, this is a perfect voice, don't worry about it. So that's, we obsess about it ourselves. No one else cares about it. That's number one. Number two is, it doesn't really matter to practice that at this stage. Sure, if you are a super advanced speaker already, you have been doing years and years of training and you want to learn some inflections, hey, go for that. But if you're starting and if you're just average speaker, putting your time into learning how to move your hands or how to change your voice, it is such a lost time. Why? Because at the end, sure, you can make some tiny changes, but they're tiny and they require consistent effort over years. Any voice changes take a lot of time. What I realized, I haven't worked on voice, I haven't worked on body language. The only thing that I focused on was, how can I feel comfortable in the moment? How can I just enjoy myself so that I'm showing up here and I'm just having a good time? And then by showing up like that, automatically, hey, my hand gestures then match my attitude. My voice goes up and down because I'm excited. And so I would say, don't waste your time on trying to fix a problem that doesn't even exist. Focus much more on, hey, how can I just become much more comfortable speaking in public, appearing in front of video, and then the rest will automatically show up.
That's very controversial, because I think I even follow like a public speaking expert who says, stand like this, shoulders far apart, and make sure your head is like this, and project your voice. And that's really interesting, actually, if you feel safe and you embody that naturally, then the hand movements and the projection will come with it, instead of you go like this with your hands and then you try this power pose and you move around the stage intentionally, right? Wow, I like that. That's different advice. So I guess you have to create that safety within yourself, like that confidence in order for everything else, like the hand gestures and the voice projection to naturally come, right? Essentially.
Yeah. What has helped me a lot to feel more comfortable is improv. Improv is really the secret tool when it comes to becoming a better speaker. Now, why is that? I realized that after trying pretty much any stuff out there when it comes to confidence, confidence comes down to one thing. It is the ability to be okay with whatever happens. And so whatever people throw at you, whatever question comes up, whatever comment you get, the slides stop working, you're just like, this is fun. I can do this. I can handle that. I can handle that. I can have fun. And so if you can get into this mindset, you'll be the most confident person possible. And also you'll be able to use all your body and your voice in the most natural way possible. Now, why does it matter so much? Because we as humans, we care so much about the judgment of other people, right? Anytime we get scared, it's like, I hope they think that I'm smart. I hope that I didn't mess anything up. I hope they think I'm pretty. We constantly worry about how other people judge us. And so the more you can just be okay with like, hey, whatever comes up, whatever goes wrong, I'm okay with that. And so really the tool, there are two tools. And one tool is improv for me. And so improvising, joining an improv group where you improvise a scene with other people, or even improvising by yourself. I did tons of times where I just get a random topic and I just start improvising a speech on the spot. And so those things help you just get much more comfortable. So whatever question comes up, whatever comment you get, you're like, I'm just having fun here. It's all right. I can do that.
Improv by yourself. I'd like to dive into that a bit more. So you said stories, but can you also do it with like, because I think the advice you normally get is over preparing. So any question, kind of like a politician, right? Any question you get, you can just boom, like divert or you can answer, right? And I think with over preparing with a presentation or with a speech is that there are gaps for random questions to come in. And then you're like, in the moment, shit, oh my God, I'm freaking out because I had a script for that question, but not for this question. So how do you improv on your own without overthinking or going that direction?
Yeah. The easiest one is probably to give a speech on the spot. So I created a website for this. It's free. It's speaking.games. And there you just get a free topic. A topic and then a timer, and you just improvise on the spot. Okay. You can do that with a friend as well. And that one, but you can also just look, hey, what are 100 debate topics? Go on Google, boom, you get a bunch of debate topics, and you just improvise a speech on the spot. But you can also do a bunch of other improv exercises. I'm by no means expert when it comes to improv. But for example, you can walk around your room and every single thing that you see, you try to name differently. So for example, here I have a glass, and then I say, okay, this is a fire-spitting hole. Then I go to the next, and I just try to do that as much as possible to just rewire my brain to think on the spot.
Yeah, comedians are very good at that.
Yeah.
Yeah, with improv and with handling, like heckling is called, right? When people
heckling.
Answer back. That's super interesting. I really, I'm just in my head now, just thinking I'm going to go home and try these things. Super cool. So I think another question the audience might have is oversharing. In a story, right? So what do you think, maybe a big question, but what do you think the difference is between oversharing in a story, like unnecessary information, versus like a more structured story, but still has depth?
Yeah, on oversharing, I noticed that it's a concern of probably 100% of the people, but it's actually only relevant for very few people because most people just undershare. And so anyone who's listening right now, I would encourage you, hey, go into the mode where you overshare a little bit and then try that out a little bit, see how it lands. I'm pretty sure you're not oversharing. It might feel like you're oversharing, but the other person might not perceive that. So I would say for most people, share actually a little bit more. Think, how can I bring more me? How can I bring more of my vulnerable side onto the table? Now, for those people who think like, okay, I do overshare a little bit, I would say, keep it short. Ask yourself, how can I share stories that are 60 seconds, 90 seconds, if you feel that you're going on a tangent oftentimes? See, how can I share those stories in a much shorter time? Maybe 30 seconds, 60 seconds, and make it a habit to tell a much shorter story.
Yeah. So would I have to just practice my storytelling essentially in order to stop my tangents?
That's it.
Because I realize I do that a lot, even though I feel like I'm confident, I'm calm. Most of the time I can handle a lot of things. I know my topics, but sometimes I just ramble and I don't know. I think there's just no cork at the end of this like bottle, which is a story, right? So you did mention before about the zooming in, the helicopter, the action, etc. With regards to like wrapping up the story, because that's kind of like the beginning of the story. Like, how do I wrap it up? I think that's my biggest issue that I have, because I'm just kind of like, I think I always go, yeah, every time I end a story.
Yeah, that's it. So, what do you think?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like validation, like, yeah, do you guys like this? Is it okay? So it's always so awkward. I never know how to wrap up a story.
Yeah, true. So let's talk about structure, because that might help. Right now we talked about zooming in, but what helps to have the foundations clear. And the foundations of any great story consists of 4 steps. CART, or cart. Like, think of a cart in the supermarket. Consists of, it has all the awesome ingredients or components of your story. And so context, you set some brief context. Where and when does it take place? Who's the main character? What does the character want? Boom, 1 or 2 sentences, that's it, done. You want to move to the second part, the most important part of the story, as quickly as possible. And that is the adversity. The adversity is like the challenge. What is the challenge that you're facing? What is the problem? That can be a physical challenge, an emotional challenge, another person, a difficult decision, anything, as long as it's substantial to you. That part is really that one is the deepest, most emotional part of this entire story. Also the most important one. So don't skip it. So that's the second. The third is resolution. So you have that big step of challenge. How do you then overcome it? What are the actions, reactions, decisions taken to overcome that problem? And then how does it turn out at the end? Now, those three steps, they are the core component of any story. But then to your question, how can I then tie it up? That is then the last step, and that is takeaway. And so takeaway is, what is the one thing that you learned from that experience? And I know in business, oftentimes we're like, well, here's my story and here's my 10 takeaways. But don't do that. Like, if you have a story, share the one thing that you learned from that experience. And so I finish most of my stories, especially in business, with one sentence. I say, what I learned from that experience is X, Y, and Z. That's it. This is how I tie up my story. What I try to avoid is the moral of the story. Why? Because then, you just sound like this preacher. No one likes that. Or you should take away, also not too good. I just say, hey, what I learned from that experience is X, Y, and Z. Or what I realized is boom. And that's it. This is how you wrap up. And then just with one sentence, one takeaway, done.
What I learned. Okay. And that's simple to remember. Just when you're telling the story and you're like, oh shit, I'm rambling a bit. Just, okay, what did I learn? Okay. And then I can teach everyone else.
That's it.
Yeah. And you mentioned mistakes. I'm curious what other mistakes people are making when they're telling stories.
Number one mistake when telling stories is giving too much context. I see this over and over again. People just giving all the context about their responsibilities, the company's history, everything in their life. And you're like, dude, none of this matters. Sure, you can give a context by saying, where and when does it take place? Who's the character? That's it, done. You want to go into the challenge as quickly as possible. So don't waste too much time on setting context. Go straight into the challenge.
Yeah, because they always say, paint the picture. Like, I was sitting here, the temperature was like this, and I was looking over at like 10 plants in the office. Like, yeah, that's always the advice I see, like on TikTok and even on ChatGPT, like, tell me how to be a better storyteller. It's like, oh yeah, really paint the picture for people.
Yeah, I think that this is terrible advice, especially on social media, at work. If you start a story and like, well, 2 weeks ago, I was in the room and I smelled this lavender in the room. And the plants were vibrating this. Obviously, you kill the story. I feel that this advice of bringing in, showing everything, sure, if you're on big stage storytelling, let's say you give a 10-minute TED Talk or so and you want to go a little bit deeper, yes, it works. But for most of us, that stuff is just not needed. On social media, no one is going to keep listening. At work, no one. It seems so fake if you bring in all those very descriptive items. So what I like to do is just to state the location.
Okay.
For example, if I say, hey, 2 weeks ago, I'm in front of the conference room taking a deep breath. Now, sure, I could describe right now the conference room in every single detail, right? I'm like, well, the conference room had a wooden table, had a projector, and chairs. You'd be like, dude, I don't care. Because the moment I say conference room, you have your own version of that conference room going in your head. And I don't care whether you visualize my conference room or your conference room, as long as you can see something. So yes, share the location, but don't share it in every single detail. Let just your audience, they can do the job of visualizing it themselves.
And I notice you do something really, really well when you speak, and it's pauses. You're very intentional with your pauses. And this is something I struggle with as well. And they're so important. It's not just the words you say or the tempo or how high pitched they are. It's also the silence to let the audience take it in, right? So what's the formula, if you know, with taking pauses, when and where? Is it like per sentence, or how does it work?
Yeah. I would like to challenge why we use pauses. Because most people say, hey, you should pause because for the dramatic effect. You should pause to make your point. But I see pauses differently. Pauses are your chance to relax and focus and thinking like, what do I really want to say here? And so I would encourage you to not think that much of pauses like, I want to really make my point in this one thing, but rather thinking, what do I really want to say? And then you go on. And so rather seeing the pause as your chance to relax a little bit and then to refocus of what you really wanted to say. Because then you will show up as more relaxed, as more present, and also you won't ramble as much. So I would encourage people, yes, practice pausing, but when you practice them, actually breathe in, breathe out, and then you go on. Sure, you don't want to make any sound when you do this, right? But then you go on. But really take a breath in and take a breath out, and then you go on. So that you actually pause, because most people are like, let me pause, and then they're like, they'll hold their breath, and then they go on. Don't do that.
Yeah. I'm also thinking as well, when I've, for example, done an impromptu speech at someone's wedding or like for like a graduation or something, I'm sure you had this too as well, just the racing heart and shit, what am I going to say? And like the pauses I would do then is from like fight or fright, right? Like pure panic. It's not even like I'm in this mode where it's like I'm pausing intentionally and I'm speaking slowly. That's also an issue, right? That some people just want to get it over and done with because they're so scared because the spotlight's on them and then it's like their moment to shine. I'm just curious as well from your side, because of course you had to start from somewhere as well. How did you deal with this? Because so many people I know really struggle with like the racing heart and the anxiety, and this is why they speak so quickly and they pause and they think, oh my God, I've forgotten everything. How did you deal with that?
Yeah, I should say that back in the days, I was terrified of public speaking. Anytime that I had to stand in front of any audience, I froze. I was like, I don't want to do this. I was just so nervous. That only changed once I made a big shift in 2017. Back then, I lived in New York, and on this one day, I came across this random article on constructive embarrassment. And I read through the article, I'm like, yeah, I think that could work. And so, the same day, I go into the street. Stranger comes closer, and I'm like, excuse me, sir, can I give you a hug? And he's like, sure, yeah, bring it in. And he gives me this awkward man hug. Then another woman comes in and I'm like, excuse me, can I give you a hug? And she's like, no, thank you. And she goes on. But on that day, I started this exercise called constructive embarrassment. And that is when you put yourself on purpose in an embarrassing situation. And that can be anything, right? Anything with other people. Ask someone for a hug. Maybe go to the next coffee shop, lie down on the floor. Maybe sing in public. Maybe dance in public. Do whatever feels cringy. And so that thing I did back then for 30 days straight. Every single day I did a task. And before that, I cared so much, right? I got so nervous. I cared so much that I got so nervous because I thought that other people would judge me in the moment. But then getting over this fear of judgment was the most liberating thing possible in those 30 days.
Oh my gosh. So you asked people, was it different tasks every day? So not just hugs, but
no.
Did you sing?
Yeah.
You sang as well?
Yeah. That one was probably the most difficult thing I did.
Yeah.
Actually, I did this one again 2 years back. I was invited to give a TED Talk in the south of Netherlands. And on that day, I was taking the train from Amsterdam there. And I thought in the train, you know what, let me get ready. And I stood up and I'm like, excuse me, could I have your attention, please? Everyone looks at me like, what does he want? I'm like, I want to sing a song for you. You should know, I'm not a good singer. Like, I don't know how to sing. But I'm like, le gusta la gasolina, dale más gasolina.
You picked that song.
Yeah,
oh
I picked that song. For full 3 minutes, I sang this song in the train. People were looking away thinking, this is madness. Please stop this. This is terrible. After the 3 minutes, I sat down. I made it. The same day, I walk on the red carpet of TED. And as I walk up, I'm like, I can do that. I just sang in a freaking train where people didn't want to listen to me. I can be here right now. I can do that. They actually want to listen to me. And so that whole thing just resets of the things where I'm scared of. And so even if you have something scary coming up, maybe an interview, maybe a podcast, maybe whatever is scary to you, do something embarrassing before, because that then just gets you ready where you realize like, hey, whatever happens, I'll be okay.
And it kind of counterbalances the even scarier thing, because you kind of diminished the scariness of the TED Talk, because that's obviously probably a really huge dream of yours. It's a really big accomplishment, also a huge crowd that has high expectations. And then singing Gasolina on the train is really, really embarrassing. So you really countered that. I love that. That's incredible. And you can do it much more subtly. It doesn't have to be singing Gasolina on the train, but you can just ask for high fives on the street or, I don't know, like prank someone on the street or in a coffee shop or something like this. It doesn't have to be so extreme, but something that's a little bit out of your comfort zone. Yeah. And that actually creates different neural pathways in your brain, because you're allowing your brain to see that taking risk is not going to be harmful, because that's what it is, right? We want to be accepted in tribes with other human beings. And this is why we don't want to embarrass ourselves or be weird, essentially, right? That's why we're scared of judgment. So you're actually telling your brain by being silly or doing these embarrassing things, like, it's okay, like, you're not going to die. People aren't going to judge you. People literally forget within an hour.
A second.
A second, exactly. So now I'm just thinking of all those people I've met on the metros that start like pole dancing and singing, that maybe they were just doing confidence exercises.
Maybe, yeah.
They're not crazy people. So is there anything that we haven't covered yet that you think is very important for people to know about confidence or storytelling?
One exercise actually, let me walk you through a few exercises that I do on a daily basis that will transform anyone into an incredible storyteller. Because, yeah, at the end, it takes some work. But there is a few things that are super powerful. And so there are 3.5 exercises that I do on a daily basis. First one is identify my story-worthy moments. That one comes from Matthew Dix. Every single day I sit down and I ask myself, what was the one moment that stood out? The one moment that touched my heart? The one moment that was a little bit more meaningful? And then I just sit down and I write down the date and that moment. That's it. That's the first one. The second one is improvise a story. So I take that moment and I improvise a story on the spot. So let's say I have this moment and then I just make up a story for like 1 or 2 minutes. That helps you train the structure, the elements, and get much more comfortable speaking off the cuff. Third, I put it oftentimes in AI. And so while I improvise, I record it in ChatGPT. So I just use the desktop function there. And after I've recorded it, I just ask it, hey, what would you refine? What would you change? And so just to get at some ideas. And sometimes I like what it does, sometimes it's not, but I'm getting new ideas on how to get better. And then 3.5. Now, in case you're wondering why 3.5, because I don't do that on a daily basis, but on a weekly basis. And that is put it into a central place, if I like the story, into a story bank. A story bank is the central place where you gather, capture, and classify your stories. And that one is the most important tool for a storyteller. Because the more stories you have in your story bank, the more you can pull them up at any opportunity. So you have this meeting, you have this keynote, you have this podcast, and then you just pull up a story. Why? Because you've put it down in that central place. And so, yeah, this is the routine, the 3.5 steps that I follow on a weekly basis to become a much better storyteller.
I love the recording with ChatGPT. Have you ever done it where you record yourself like video to see your posture, to see how long the speech is and stuff like that? I've done that a few times.
Yeah, I used to do that much more, and it is very helpful. It is very helpful because back in the days, for example, I looked much more like a grumpy teenager all the time when I was speaking. And so this just helps you spot things that you might be doing wrong. Now I see myself all the time on video, so I don't get any extra reps, but it is super helpful.
And the story bank, is that of course it's in your brain, but do you store it like on Google Drive? Is it a document? Is it like, how can we have a story bank?
Yeah, I store mine in Notion.
Oh yeah, Notion's good.
Yeah. And also, if anyone wants my template, just send me a message on Instagram or on LinkedIn, and I'll send you my story bank.
Oh my gosh, yes, please. I want it too. And tell us more about Story Lab as well, because we can see the logo. So I guess this is your company, right? Yeah, tell us more about that.
Yeah, it is my company. So we give storytelling workshops, trainings to companies around the world. So we've been working with a bunch of, I would say, rather bigger companies. So like Google, Oracle, Salesforce, Visa, and many, many more. And so what we do is storytelling workshops, presentation skills training, and some other communication skills training as well.
It's so important because, yeah, I've sat in some meetings, Philip, where I'm just like, oh my God, this is the dullest topic. Or like it's just KPIs and stuff or analytics. And you're like, oh my gosh, like, is this done yet? And even being a good storyteller, like in the most mundane topics, can make such a difference, particularly for companies that you've mentioned as well. And I think the methods that you've given us today and the frameworks can really work in everything, even like a job interview.
Absolutely.
It can be so impactful. You can really create a story and affect the recruiter or the hiring manager on the other side to the point where they could hire you.
That's it. Yeah.
For the most like simple story that you can tell, that you've zoomed in on and explained.
On this one, I would actually be curious. I kind of want to go through some recruiting process.
Yeah.
Because back then I did a bunch of recruiting, but I didn't know how to tell stories. So I got a lot of rejections. I'm curious how that would change today. So maybe I just do some random applications.
Yeah. Oh, so you as an applicant tell stories as a candidate. That's so interesting. Yeah. I think also, like, if you taught this as well to recruitment teams and like job seekers as well, that could be really, really interesting, because even the person on the other side doesn't know how to explain the company's mission and stuff like that. So being able to tell the story, like, it's a two-way street, essentially, just like dating as well. Like, you want to tell your story about your past and what your ambitions are and your business and sell yourself kind of thing, right? So Yeah, I think this framework, what you're doing is almost applicable to everything, not just writing a novel, but being human, telling stories.
That's it.
It's amazing. Philipp, this was so incredible, so insightful, and I'm just in my head a bit because I just want to practice this at home. Where can I find you if I want to work with you? So Storylab, obviously, but you've mentioned LinkedIn, YouTube as well. You've got some followers on YouTube as well.
Yeah. I'm posting once a week on YouTube, so there you find tons of content. Send me a message on LinkedIn or on Instagram if you want to have the story bank. Then, you can just find me under Philipp Humm. And then, my company name is storylab.co. And that's where you also find everything about me.
And Philipp has a lot of content on YouTube. You literally give all your secrets away. And you're also an author. You have how many books?
3.
3 books. And what are they all different categories?
One on storytelling for sales, one on public speaking, and the third one storytelling in business.
Sales is a good one. We didn't really touch on that, but
true.
You can obviously apply this to sales. That's actually really wow. That's
maybe
probably
round 2.
Yeah, that you have to buy the book. No, that would be really compelling. Wow, that could really change. Well, yeah, this will change people's lives, I think. Understanding how to tell stories, and they'll go on better dates. They'll perform better in job interviews. They'll do impromptu speeches at weddings and stuff. This is really life-changing stuff. This is amazing. Philipp, I just want to say thank you so much for coming on Realistic Happiness. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me.